raised its ugly head. One of the people then who was implicated was a representative named Larry Craig, who was then a congressman from Idaho. Of course, we found out about him later. In the late 80s, we had the so-called Franklin scandal involving the Franklin Credit Union in Nebraska. And again, we had midnight tours, as you showed earlier, the headline from the Washington Times that was worked on by my late colleague, Paul Rodriguez, and got no attention from the Washington Post. As a matter of fact, I should point out that my story on Hastert in 2006 was met with derision by the mainstream media then. I note this morning they're all calling me up now for comment and my original sources. So I think that's kind of...
it's huge. I'm giving you the floor when we come back in 70 seconds. I want you to continue to lay out more on how you were saying this connected to Boehner. It's clear Boehner's being blackmailed. I mean, he's committing political suicide for the Republicans right now. He's selling the country out on the TPP, on the borders. Why? Well, it's blackmail. Last night, I was downtown having dinner with friends at their condo, and I called Buckley, my cousin, who also lives nearby, and I said, will you come by with the rig, the microphone and the iPhone, so we can do a report on Hastert? I was going to wait till today to cover it, but I decided instead to just do one last night. And then after I shot the report, or right before I shot the report, I thought, man, Wayne Madsen talked about how it's all a pedophile ring and tied to this wrestling coach who they basically promoted so he'd be compromised. I need to get Wayne Madsen on. And, of course, he's being called by the media now because Wayne broke all this in his report. In fact, I have a copy of the report now you just sent me from 2006. But what was the title of the report then, Wayne?
I had several. I had probably about 10 reports from September 30th to around October the 10th, 2006. The first one was major cover-up suspected in GOP's PageGate, now rocking Capitol Hill. Hastert's name was mentioned in that report. September 7th to 8th, the rumors about another top GOP member of the House being involved in sexual encounters with young men for hire are confirmed to my website by well-placed sources in Washington's gay community. That was Hastert, by the way. Several other reports, again, all surrounding the Foley matter. But I think it's important to point out that the Foley situation involved other members of Congress all running for cover and trying to hire members of Foley's staff because they were implicated. Representative Tom Reynolds from New York, Shimkus, Dennis Hastert's fellow Republican congressman from Illinois, who was a member of the House Page Board. A lot of this has to do with the Page Board, the governing body. You know, the House Page Board doesn't exist. The House Page system doesn't even exist anymore because of the Foley scandal. They got rid of it. It still exists in the Senate, however.
So it's basically, as best I can tell, a cult of pedophiles, and that you can't get in unless you're part of it. And they've basically, like the Catholic Church, taken it over.
Yeah. There's a couple of funny anecdotes. I mean, it's a serious case. I remember walking with a friend of mine, and we encountered Charlie Rangel back in those days in the rotunda. And we, you know, if you're with somebody and they kind of look at something and it's like an inside, they have some inside information. Well, here comes Hastert walking across the rotunda with a young, very young male page. Obviously, you see members of Congress with their senior staffers, chief of staff all the time. But this was very unusual. And I noticed a wry smile on Congressman Rangel's face, like he knew something. And, you know, the neurolinguistics on that one said everything. And I actually had the opportunity of running into Hastert after he was speaker at the GOP convention in 2000 in Tampa. There was kind of a people traffic jam in the arena. And he was standing right next to me, and I looked at him and I said, how's retired life treating you, Mr. Speaker? using the honorific. I know he wasn't speaker, but it's the DC thing. And he said good, and then he said, I forgot your name, and I told him, and the guy turned pale and said, I got to get back to my Illinois delegation. So clearly he recalled the reports that I had on his misconduct back in 06.
Oh, you're definitely on target. And Wayne, we talked about this last time you were here. I'm just going to, you agreed to do it. We never hammered it out. You're hired. I want to get you on every week. I want you writing for InfoWars. We need to talk details today. Because, you know, years just go by like seconds, as you know, and I need you on the InfoWars team. So we're going to get that done, aren't we?
Sure. Yeah, you're right about years going by, especially at 61. I feel the rush of the years.
Well, hey, listen, I mean, I'm no Hastert, so don't worry. I'm not going to ask you on a date, but you lost a lot of weight, man. You're looking good.
Well, I'm trying.
No, you're doing great. Here we go. Excited. We've talked about this a couple times. He's been here. We've discussed it. I've just never gotten it done, but we just agreed in there. I'm hiring Wayne Madsen. He'll still have WayneMadsenReport.com to be a full-time reporter for InfoWars.com. I mean, he's one of the best out there. We finally built this operation. We're going on cable. We're going on all the systems. We're already picked up by a lot of cable and TV systems already. We're on over 170 AM and FM affiliates. What I'm doing here at InfoWars.com is building a true media operation. Yes, I'm the rabble-rouser. I'm the pundit. But I bring you the bombshell guest, the intel, the reporters. Joe Biggs is going to be on the ground at the Draw Prophet Muhammad demonstration tonight in Phoenix. So all of that is coming up as well. And this is what I need. 4 or 5 more reporters, a couple of text writers, a couple of guys that can do both, a couple of ladies that can do both, so that we can really cover 3 or 4 big stories simultaneously with people on the ground. Okay, if you can, this is so big. Wayne Madsen wrote not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. We're in his archives right now. In 2006, about Dennis Hastert and connections to pedophile rings and compromised Congress people. He's taken from nowhere, put into the House of Representatives, accelerated into Republican leadership that, you know, Ron Paul was there 20-something years and never got put in any leadership. Put into leadership, and then Boehner was under him. And Boehner's connected to all this. So I want to specifically recap it and get into Boehner and then ask Wayne Madsen before we shift gears into ISIS, the economy, and more. This signifies trying to scare people in the Republican House to get in line on the TPP, to get in line on a bunch of other issues. So I want to ask you what you think it signifies and where all this is going with Obama's unprecedented persecution. I'm not crying for Denny Hastert, but unprecedented persecution of the press and others. Wayne Madsen.
Well, I mean, we're getting into the 2016 presidential race, so we're going to probably see a lot more of this. Of course, Hastert's not a candidate, but somebody who basically defended this activity is a candidate. And I would just cite that at the time that I made these reports in October of 2006, the St. Petersburg Times on October 4th, 06, it's now the Tampa Bay Times, reported on the knowledge of top Florida Republicans, including then Governor Jeb Bush and Attorney General Charlie Crist, who was then a Republican, about the Foley-Hastert scandal in Washington. And this is a quote from the St. Pete Times. In a gaggle with Florida's Capitol Press Corps Wednesday, Governor Jeb Bush flatly refused allegations posted on an internet website and circulated widely Tuesday that claims Bush, Attorney General Charlie Crist, and Florida Department of Law Enforcement were all told by the Federal Justice Department about Mark Foley's emails a year ago, but covered it up. The alleged conspiracy sourced to inform sources in Tallahassee who were not named was reported on the Wayne Madsen Report website. Madsen's website claims to tackle the politically incorrect and politically embarrassing stories and holds government officials accountable for their actions. Bush responded to a question from the St. Pete Times reporter in Tallahassee about my report, and he said, if the next governor, referring to Charlie Crist, who was running for the seat to succeed Bush, is going to have to respond to every blog and every tired little anonymous person who has some bitter part in their soul who wants to express it on the internet, it's not going to work, unquote. That was now presidential candidate Jeb Bush, his comment on the Hastert-Foley scandal at the time. Why was he interested in covering it up?
Well, that's the word that going back, that it wasn't Reagan that had the call boys in there, that it was that it was George Herbert Walker Bush, yes. And that it goes all the way back to that. And that's what the Washington Times reported. Hundreds, wasn't it hundreds? In fact, we can pull the news article up, the scan of it, of the Washington Times. Wasn't it hundreds of times underage call boys were visiting after midnight?
Well, there were reports that Bush was seen at these get-togethers in Nebraska where they would fly, in some cases, either fly child prostitutes in or get them out of Boys Town, the Roman Catholic famous orphanage outside of Omaha.
Well, it also ties in, doesn't it, Wayne, to Penn State? I mean, we know Sandusky is in there raping people from this, troubled youth group at high noon on Saturdays. I mean, a field house on the weekend is a busy place. He certainly felt like he was safe. So here's the other question. Why are they now busting people when they've been good, helpful servants of Sauron?
Well, I mean, it's the nature of Washington. That place will eat their own alive. And, it's just, it's getting worse and worse there because one thing about the Congress, they used to have statesmen. The worst thing you would catch them on is getting drunk in public or messing around with a prostitute of the opposite sex. I'm thinking, Wilbur Mills and Wayne Hayes and people like that. But nowadays it's getting into more of the illegal aspects, which is underage sex.
But is that because it's a club? And just like in the mafia or street gangs, you got to commit some horrible crime that people have to prove themselves and be compromised. Isn't that classic criminal psychology?
Oh, I think it's a blackmail operation from the word go. Look at some of these people. We have David Vitter, the senator from Louisiana, now running for governor. I mean, he was paying prostitutes. He would soil his diaper, and then they would scold him and spank him and have to clean him up. I mean, what is the matter with a state that would elect an individual like that to be their U.S. senator?
And it keeps coming out. What about the Senator Lindsey Graham? I mean, I've got it from a lot of Washington sources that he's really compromised.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've said for a long time the GOP nowadays stands for, gray old perverts. And of course, I've had people from the major newspaper in South Carolina, which is the state out of the capital, Columbia, say, why isn't anyone in Washington reporting on our pretty well-known gay senator, Lindsey Graham, who, by the way, publicly is anti-gay rights? But how many times have we seen that? Those who proclaim this the loudest. Rick Santorum, who announced the other day for the presidency, once again, he was a good friend of Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. And then, of course, they all run from these guys after they get caught. As I'm sure many of them are saying about Hastert, they're saying Dennis who. The amazing thing is Hastert was third in line for the presidency. So think back to 9/11, and although we know that was an inside operation, but what if Bush had been harmed that day and Cheney became president? Then that would have made Hastert second in line for the presidency. That's pretty scary to know that somebody that blackmailed could have wound up in that type of...
Well, sure, but I mean, looking at Sandusky, looking at Hastert, it's not that they were fat. I mean, everybody can get fat. I've been overweight. They look like something's wrong with them. I mean, I wouldn't buy a car from them. I wouldn't associate with them. They look like deranged scum. And people say don't judge a book by its cover. No, I mean, quite frankly, you can judge people generally by looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, listening to them, and seeing how they act. I look at the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership. They look like a bunch of perverts. They look like a bunch of Jeffrey Dahmers. I mean, I'm sorry. They look like a bunch of scum.
Right. And I mean, and we're talking about Republicans, but I'm still not satisfied that Harry Reid damn near put his eye out as a result of an accident with his